And insecurity is the, I would say, only reason we are not able to take feedback. When somebody gives us feedback, I'm secure about something, I can take that feedback and improve. People who are secure, who are actually really good, can actually improve. They have no problem improving. But people who are insecure and they question themselves, they will push back on the feedback.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leadership 3.0, our podcast for the Leading People course at Haas. And I'm here with my incredible teammates.
Hi, I'm Giovanna Guevara. I'm in tech consulting.
Hi, I'm Jake Janowski. I'm in operations consulting.
Hello, I'm Kizito Akonna. I am in medical device manufacturing and ops.
Hello, my name is Meng Yao Yang. I'm in financial technology.
Hello, I'm Sojen Aramanchi, and I work in AI and machine learning.
Hello, my name is Teddy Castro, and I'm in marketing.
Over the course of this class, we've explored what it really means to lead people, like how to build strong and motivated teams, make thoughtful decisions, foster safe environments for innovation, and show up authentically as leaders. But today, we want to explore a side of leadership that is often left unspoken, which is how personal insecurities, even when hidden, can shape the way we lead, the way we manage teams, and the kind of culture we create in our organizations. Our guest today is someone who brings a very unique perspective to this topic, Yogi Sharma. Yogi started his career in the world of research and technology. He was a research scientist at Meta, he holds a PhD from Cornell, and he earned the President's Gold Medal from IIT Kanpur. Yogi left all of that to pursue something that was more meaningful to him. Today, Yogi is an executive coach who helps people grow into more grounded, self-aware, and authentic versions of themselves. He works very closely with high-performing leaders to help them lead teams and organizations with much greater clarity and purpose. Yogi, thank you so much for being here, and we are really, really excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Sujay, for that great introduction. I am looking forward to our conversation too.
Awesome. So Yogi, can we start off with your journey? You have a remarkable resume, top schools, Meta, and then you left all of that to become a coach. Could you walk us through what led to that decision?
Let me take you to my time back in Meta, then called Facebook. I joined when there were 500-600 people. It was really exciting time to be joining a company so small and making huge impacts at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was there for about 6.5 years, left when there were 15,000 people. And during this time, I think I really enjoyed my time there. But I also realized that my way of making impact was different from the way Facebook was trying to make impact. And I love to have deep conversation with people and really see the glow on somebody's face when they get an insight and they change their behavior and in ensuing days, weeks, and months, change their life. And that's very exciting for me. And I knew that, but I didn't know how to actually implement it in my life. So I just left Facebook, and then I had a couple offers, the Uber and Pinterest, and those options to explore a path that was uncharted for me at the time. And over time, I found my groove into coaching, which I didn't even know it existed. So I found it over time.
Thank you, Yogi. I mean, that is impressive. And I think that's a very gutsy call to make, but thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. And Yogi, at least from the outside, if I look at your resume and your life, it looks like you've had just a stellar career and had everything under control. And even such bold decisions, you were able to do that, just knowing what you want, even if it meant taking a lot of risks. But I wanted to ask you, internally, did it feel the same way to you, or were you ever insecure?
Was I ever insecure? No, I've never been insecure. I'm just talking about this. So the whole point of the topic we are discussing is that I've always been insecure. And I was trying to hide it for a long time in my life. I've done, as you mentioned, well, in my college, I got President Gold Medal. I then did my PhD, and then I taught for some time, and then I in Facebook. But through all of that time, despite doing very well, or mostly well, I was very insecure internally. And after 17 years of my career in software, I realized I'm still I was still a very insecure software engineer. And I was trying to project security outside and trying to be better, be better, be better, and hide that insecurity. And that really tired me out over 17 years of my career in software. So I've been very insecure. And it's only recently that I won't say I'm secure completely, but I've started to talk about and accept my insecurity. And that has brought a certain level of security within me, which has been very welcome in my life. So I have a lot of insecurity in my life, yes, and have learned to accept it and also work through that. And that gives me security.
Was that a turning point that influenced that decision, or
It was actually about 4 years ago. I was in my coaching business. I was trying to, so most of my coaching comes from referrals and people telling each other and word of mouth. But I was trying to also reach out and just post content on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook and just share my insight there. And the first thing I came across was like, who am I? Who am I to share this stuff? Who will listen to me? There are like big influencers, there are big people out there and big executive coach, and who cares about my opinion? And was very insecure. And it took me a while. I'm a coach, but I also get coaching from multiple coaches. And one of my coaches at the time helped me through to put myself out there and feel the insecurity. And I actually got a couple of comments also during that time, which were very aggressive and saying, what are you talking about? Things like that. And that was also very helpful because the insecurity actually materialized. And I worked through that. And that really helped me be out there and share my ideas. And I have a lot more reach now through coaching and through other work that I do to actually help people beyond coaching. It would never have happened otherwise if I were just being insecure.
Thank you, Yogi. So, I mean, if I understand that you had to embrace it, and the only way was through it, basically.
Yeah, and of course, there's a lot of support. It's not just it was the only way through it, and you just post it, and then let's see what happens. I went through a little bit of a crisis in my own mind and body during that time, and the people who were supporting me were able to support me through that.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate that you shared that you continue to work with coaches. There's always room for us to grow as students, as leaders. And that really aligns with one of the Haas's defining principles, student always. Following up on seeing insecurities among leaders, because I can't see into the minds of my leaders. I don't really know what's driving their motivations and their actions, but I think probably sometimes some of the actions were driven by their insecurity. In your coaching work, how do you see these insecurities show up inside of organizations?
Good question. What you're asking is, how do these covered insecurities in leaders show up in organization? And typically, what I've seen through working with small and medium-sized startups, and of course, working with a lot of people in big tech, is I think what happens is the culture deteriorates in the company, where it becomes less important to make an impact, but it's more important to tell the right story or have the right documents and have all the trails that you can show that you did the work instead of making the impact. So focus becomes more on not the work, but just covering yourself. And that culture tends to not reward good work, good impact. That's what I've seen typically happen in companies and organizations, actually.
That's actually super interesting because we think about, like, when you think about a leader being a certain way or being driven by something, you're like, well, it maybe impacts their team, but what you're saying is it like actually impacts the whole motivation and the drive of the culture, where you're driven by individual, maybe markers of achievement, as opposed to developing something and having like a shared vision.
Yes. And when people are insecure, there's no psychological safety in the team or organization. What happens is people are not able to share, I don't know this, can you help me? And then people have to hide not knowing. And that leads to inefficiencies. For example, if you tell somebody, hey, I don't know this, then you become you look like a fool once. But if you don't share that and you don't learn that, then you might not look like a fool right away, but you are internally looking like a fool all the time because you don't know. You're insecure inside and you're trying to hide something.
Thank you for that. Do you think that this kind of scenario where people are hiding the fact that they don't know something, again, driven by insecurity, might show up in places where people have what would be considered traditional high achieving markers, like having gone to Ivy League schools or having completed a PhD as you have, because you're expected to be like a super high achieving person to know everything. And so that drives the idea that everyone should already know everything.
Yeah. And that happened with me when I joined Facebook. I was from a PhD from an Ivy League school, and I had a hard time asking for small things because I was supposed to be a PhD and from an Ivy League school. And that really made life difficult for me. I made my own life difficult, more difficult than it needed to be. Instead of, and I saw many people, both in Facebook and before Facebook, when people are able to just open up, ask questions, they don't know much in the moment, but they make tremendous progress over time. A friend of mine when they joined Cornell, I know they didn't know much, and they asked a lot of questions that seem very basic. And she's a full professor at a good university now, and has worked through all of that.
Thank you for sharing that, Yogi. That's such an interesting point that when you make like small changes, sometimes it can make like big impacts. So it actually reminds me of, something we've learned and studied this semester about psychological safety. So we learned that when leaders live from insecurity, that sense of safety are easily to disappear. However, when leaders they show up authentically, the people from their teams usually can, speak up or take risks or even like push back when it's necessary. I'm curious, Yogi, can you share a story of a leader who managed to build this sense of safety for their teams?
Creating psychological safety, to create that in an organization, the leader needs to be very secure. Because a lot of times, psychological safety is about people feeling secure, people feeling they're able to share themselves, their knowledge and lack of knowledge, security and insecurity, all kinds of things they can share. But that does not mean you get a free ride if you're not doing the work. Psychological safety does not mean you will not let go from the team if you're not doing the work over and over again. Psychological safety means you will be given a chance, you'll be listened to, and people will be there to help you. And I saw this in one of the startups I worked with. The CEO of the startup had sold another business in the past, and they were very secure. They had a lot of clarity, and their teammates, or their not teammates, but the people who are like CTOs and the executive teams and the employees were able to bring to him the kinds of problems, including personal problems and professional problems, that most CEOs shy away from. And he was able to hold boundaries. Sometimes he could help, other times he could just say, I can't help. But they were able to bring up the issues. So psychological safety, he was able to create psychological safety that way. But the reason people are not able to create that, leaders are not able to create it, is that if somebody opens up their mental health challenges, oh, now I'm stuck with somebody who is not a performer. Now what do I do? So I better not create that, so that I can just keep pushing people out of fear. Being able to have a hard conversation, being able to have a conversation with a member of your team saying things are not going okay and you're not performing well, is a skill you want to develop. Otherwise, you will never be able to develop psychological safety in your team for the fear of people misusing you.
Thank you for sharing this story. I feel like it's so powerful, and also building this inclusive environment within the teams, and also being able to, share the very hard conversation with your teammates, and also being open-minded with your teammates is really essential to build out this psychological safety. So it also made me realize that sometimes we overlook the emotional side of the work. So even though we all know that psychological safety can help shape, culture and performance in such an important way. So from your perspective, do you have any like day-to-day suggestions or practical things that leaders can do to create such sense of safety for their teams?
To create psychological safety in the team, you mean?
Yes.
I think one of the many things, of course, when I work with people, I go into detail of their situation and what they can do and understand their situation. But at a very high level, what I can say, the first thing the leader has to do is to earn trust of the team. It's okay to be insecure, but it's important also that people trust you, know that you're good. If you are just not good at anything, people won't respect you. They don't trust at that point. So you are good at some things. You got to establish that. And then once that happens, or at least in the process of that happening, then you just want to start opening up about what you find difficult, what your vulnerabilities are. I'll give an example of this from my PhD time. One of my professors, we knew he is very good. But in the seminars, when we went to seminars, he would ask questions when nobody else was asking questions because he could see the room that people are not following it, and he would volunteer to be that person who doesn't get it.
Mm.
But we knew that sometimes he didn't get it, other times he got it, but he was serving other people. So being able to share your own insecurities is very helpful for people to feel that they are able to share theirs also. But it's also important not to let that become like a support group and people are not performing. Right? So that's a difficult conversation you want to learn. But if you're able to have difficult conversation, then you want to develop trust that you are good. And on top of that, start to share, well, where you struggle with, what your difficulties are, what you struggled with in the past. So having those conversations is very helpful.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, Yogi. Thanks for that. That was super, super insightful. My questions kind of backpedal off of some of what you were talking about difficult conversations and about opening up about your insecurities. We've been talking a bit in one of our classes at Haas about authentic leadership. There's a tricky line, right, between being your authentic self and oversharing, like such as how do leaders know when to show some vulnerability and when to just put on a brave face and keep it together. Do you have any insight into that?
Vulnerability sometimes can hurt you. That's what we're saying. And the whole point of vulnerability is that it's not vulnerability so I can get some benefit, although benefits do come, but sometimes vulnerability and showing insecurity can actually be detrimental for you. And taking that short-term hit is a question that you want to ask yourself. What I've found in my work with people is that short-term vulnerability tends to be hard, especially before you actually become vulnerable. You're thinking about it, you're sharing your insecurities, very hard. And then even after that, you share, you get vulnerability hangover sometimes. Was the right thing to share? Did I overreach? Can it hurt me? And it can. If vulnerability cannot hurt you, it's actually not vulnerability to begin with. So what I suggest to people is to have an incremental approach to vulnerability. When you're meeting a friend or you're building new friends, you don't share all your life stories on the first day. You share a little bit. Then let's say you're meeting a bunch of people. Some of the people are receptive to that. They like it. Then with some of them, you share a little bit more. Then some people drop off from there and you share a little bit more. And over time, you learn to be more and more vulnerable in the environment that values vulnerability. If you're a leader, you can actually be vulnerable a little bit more quickly because the power structure is in your favor at that point. So incremental vulnerability is an example or is a strategy that I would say that tends to work well. Instead of like the first day you spill all your beans and I've been vulnerable, this is my problems, and that's not okay.
Is there ever too much vulnerability, in your opinion?
I believe there is not too much vulnerability. It can be vulnerability too quickly. Sometimes people there's no right context. You are not in the company of trusting people, and then you are vulnerable too much, too quickly, And that can be detrimental for you. And also it's not good for you because vulnerability is something you want to share with people you trust, not just anybody and a stranger on the street.
Makes sense. Do you have any examples of leaders who you've seen or coached or worked with having some of that kind of argument within themselves of how much vulnerability to share?
Yeah, definitely. One of the CTOs I'm working with from a hardware company, he is extremely good. He is a strong researcher, and many people in the company tell me about him, about how strong a scientist and engineer he is. But he has difficulties with setting boundaries with his reportees. And we have worked for about a year or so now with him, and it's very hard for him to open up with people, partly because he's been good, he's been stellar, excellent in most of his career and life, and not being good at anything is not he's used to. And what has happened with him is that over time we help him become a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more open with his team. Then he start to see some positive benefits of that, and then he's willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and open, and then a little bit more benefit. The first day, if I were to ask him to do the thing that we are doing now, a year later, he's like, no, hell no, of course not, I can't do that. So these things happen over time, and helping a supportive hand throughout is very helpful, because even though you might be taking small vulnerable steps, it's scary. Your psyche, your mind will question, double guess, will stop you from doing it. And you need somebody who can see a bigger picture, see a bigger landscape, and we're doing it for a good purpose and a good reason.
Interesting. A lot of lessons to take from that. Definitely resonates. Appreciate that.
Hey Yogi, thanks for the questions that we've answered so far about like insecurities. I'm curious to know, right? One of our most difficult transitions that we have as human beings, like some of us will go through, is parenting, right? I'm curious to know if you have seen parenting bring up like insecurities that affect how people show up in a workplace.
That question is pretty close to my heart, because I became a father just 3 years ago, and it brought a lot of insecurity in me. Because, as I mentioned, I used to be very insecure. I'm not doing enough. And usually in a job, if you don't do enough, what happens? Well, you get fired. We are insecure about that, but the consequences are not that bad. But if you mess up your child, the consequence internally can be a lot worse. So what if you make mistakes? And I've seen this in me for sure. Just the other day, maybe a week ago, I was having a conversation with like a very high level L7, L8 level engineer, and their problem seemed very organizational, manager and them conflicting over something. And that's what we do in coaching. We're able to go deep into what this is really about. And we realize what was this really about after an hour of conversation was they're afraid that they will not provide for their kids, the younger kid who is younger kid at the time. And that's a lot of time insecurity is amplified when it comes to kids. And this is evolutionarily true, because we have evolved to care for our kids, and nowadays insecurity pops up a lot in parenting. So I've seen this in myself, a bunch of people I work with, and even in professional setting. I don't really limit my coaching to professional. We help people live a life of success and harmony, but in career, but whatever it comes in the way. And sometimes, a lot of time, this is personal life, relationships, kids, all kinds of things come up, and we deal with all of that. And parenting is one of the things that comes up a lot.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned it, like, because kids are like the future of the tomorrow, and parents often go above and beyond to make sure that everything is done right for the kids, right? So, but then at some point, like, it kind of like can lead to that overexpression of like our insecurities, like you mentioned, right? So this is awesome conversation. I want to switch gears a little bit to ask, right? So do you see like these kind of insecurities across, gender lines, across, race, show up in the workplace?
May I add to the kid thing one more thing, and then we'll get to this question. Also, so what happens is the cycle of insecurity keeps propagating because we try to be secure in front of our kids and we are not secure. We don't open up. And usually when we are pushed something down, when we push our emotions down, what happens is our body still communicates. Our tonality, our body language still communicates outwards. And kids are very perceptive and they sense our insecurity. We try to be secure, we try to be strong, and then they end up becoming insecure because that's what the role model they saw. So we tend to perpetuate insecurity by not accepting it, owning it, and being able to talk about it.
I was going to switch gears a little bit to the natural mechanism that people have with this insecurity is like hiding it. And we can often see that hiding it can lead to burnout, right? And lead to like regression in whatever success we have in our careers. But then, there's a thought out there that like insecurity is not always a negative thing, right? So my question is, how can we leverage the power of this insecurity to achieve success in a workplace, relationships, and the rest of it?
And that's a good point. Insecurity is a luxury we have in order to expose our insecurity. In the early years, when we were growing up, and most of us, grew up insecure. And insecurity has propelled us to do very well. Insecurity has propelled us to do well, prove people wrong, and do well for ourselves. So it's a positive. Over time, it takes a toll on us. And I think whenever we are able to be in a state where the expression of insecurity cannot hurt us or will not hurt us too bad, at that point it's worth opening up and being vulnerable. But until then, I think being insecure, and it can really help us. It can really help us succeed. It can really help us work hard beyond sometimes our capacity even. What I'll say is, I think insecurity can bring a lot of success. And it does bring a lot of success to a lot of people. Until my PhD times, I was very insecure and I was just trying to impress people, my parents and my professors and teachers. And that really got a lot of success for me. If you're looking for just success, I think insecurity might just be enough. Insecurity, fear. What we don't get through that is fulfillment in life. You're always not okay with yourself. So if you're looking for success and then fulfillment also, fulfillment means being content with yourself, right? The worst failure I heard from one of the teachers, worst failure is to succeed and realize that's not enough. And that's what we miss is fulfillment. So in a way, that contrast is important. The exposure of our insecurity, being vulnerable, being authentic, brings fulfillment over time. And success can come without that also.
For sharing that, yeah, because it's definitely important as we chase success to actually also like address those insecurities as well, right? So while we can leverage it as a benefit, we can also kind of watch out for enjoyment of that success that we've leveraged it to utilize, right? So yeah, thank you so much for that insight.
It's my turn. So speaking of insecurity and then that leading to success, can you go a little bit more into detail about an example or a story perhaps of your own or someone you've coached or read about and how they changed that insecurity into a strength?
This is an example of, in leadership, a couple examples come to me, but the strong example that comes to me is of a strong engineer I was working with. He had a small team and they were very insecure about their work, but they were unable to expose themselves and seek help because they were insecure and they thought if they open up, they will actually, they will disappoint people around them. And I worked with them over a few months to open up slowly. And open up doesn't mean we share, oh, I'm insecure about this. Open up just means open the truth. A lot of time we think truth is not enough. If I become authentic and true, it just won't be enough. And with that person, we were able to just start to report to their, their manager, their skip level, to their team about what they're doing, what they're up to, being completely open and transparent about this. And that led to people knowing what their gaps were, but they also appreciated a lot what they were doing already, which the person thought it's not enough. It's not enough. And that led them to actually grow a lot within like 6 months to a year in the company, because other people became aware of where they were lacking and were willing to help them out. So both were true. They were insecure, they were lacking knowledge. At the same time, they were actually doing a lot and they didn't realize they're doing a lot. So both were true. So what happens is the transformation happened not because, oh, you become vulnerable and you're not doing enough. Usually you're doing enough, and on top of that, you're insecure. You're doing a lot and you're insecure. And if you open about both of them, then a lot of help can come our way and you can transform your career and organization.
And you said that was over a 6-month span, correct?
Probably 6 months, a year, yeah, something like that.
Okay. And so if I wanted to go ahead and begin that journey of opening up to my manager and the various other teams within my company or organization, what are some practical next steps for me to do that?
One of the things that's very useful is to just realize that vulnerability is not a panacea. Part of vulnerability is you can get hurt. Okay? So it doesn't mean that just because you open up means you'll get good things in return. So that's why you want to be able to open up slowly, gently. For example, if being honest with about what you're good at, what you're not good at, with your manager, with your peers, with your people in the team. So that's the one thing I'll say, to being honest. Start to be honest, but open up a little bit and see how people respond. And over time, you might realize this team is a toxic team and you might want to get out eventually. Or you might realize actually the team was good. I was just not appreciating that team. And then you can open up more and more with them. That's the one thing. Second thing, I think a lot of times we have expectations from people. We expect things should be XYZ, a certain way. And over time, setting up agreements with people. Agreements just mean that we both agree on what the consequences are for doing something or not doing something, instead of expecting that, well, this is how things should be. A lot of times, a lot of problems happen when people are not even able to see eye to eye on certain issues. So with your manager, with your team, with the reportees, start to have agreements. And a lot of times I've seen with the hardware startup I was talking about, people just keep saying, oh, we'll try to meet this deadline. And they don't meet the deadline. There's not really consequence for anything. And they think they're being nice to people, but things keep slipping. And we help them set agreements. And if you are not meeting agreement, then you let people know as soon as possible so we can come up with alternate plan B. So I think those are the agreements, set up agreements with people and start to open up little by little.
And when you say little by little, how little are we talking about? Because I can imagine that if someone has a considerably low self-esteem or perhaps a considerably low level of public speaking, that this could be a big hindrance for it.
Yeah, it can be. And what I suggest to people in that case is to open up to yourself in front of the mirror first. Like you sit in front of the mirror and just accepting that, well, my reportee said this and I was upset by that. And the upsetness was nothing to do with them, but I'm afraid about my own job maybe. And I'm just afraid about that. Say to yourself in front of the mirror. A lot of times we just convince ourselves of a story we are telling ourselves. It's not even true. So being honest with yourself first is a good step, and that is completely safe. in terms of like there are no consequences to that except you clear your own mind and emotions in the process.
Yeah, that sounds like a good next step, especially a first step for someone who can use a little bit more guidance on their journey of self-reflection and then self-improvement. One aspect that I do want to touch on a little bit more, and I think we have a little bit more time left with you, is the idea of groupthink. So being perceived by others, right, can impact a lot of self-esteem and self-confidence. And so how does one go about building that aspect?
It's very real. But others' perception of you is quite important. It's not just what you do and what you stand for, it's also what people perceive you to be.
Mhm.
And the first thing I tell people when they bring such issue is to be aware of this and accept the gravity of this. Many people keep fighting in their head like it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what people think of me. But it does. It does matter what people think of you. So I think doing good work, managing a team, being a good leader is one part of your job. But managing your perception with stakeholders, with adjacent team members, is also your job. And people think that's not your job. So that's the one thing, that's how the world works. And being aware of that and giving it its proper due, number one. And number two, there are some principles of how you can influence that perception. And there are some very good, some of these principles are outlined in a book called Influence, book by Robert Cialdini. And he talks about being likable, being authentic, having some social proof, things like that. You wanna have those, you wanna be aware of that and also build those relationships with people. Eventually, perceptions are built by doing good work, but also having good relationships with people. Like there are a ton of people who will do amazing work, but they are so confrontational all the time that it's hard to have good perception of them. On the other hand, if you're not doing good work and just you're trying to manage perception all the time, there's not a whole lot to stand on. Your house will crumble. It's a house of cards. So doing both, doing good work and manage perception, and giving both of them some attention.
That makes sense because no one is truly an individual, right? We're all part of different communities, and whatever we do, whatever we say, can not only impact ourselves, but those around us.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Yogi. We really appreciate answering all of our questions, sharing those stories. It's very fruitful, and I'm sure that the people listening will also find that true. Are there any other questions on our end from our team that we would like to share? For this part, we can all come on camera and then open share forum style. Any burning questions?
I do want to talk about the idea that the worst failure is to succeed and realize that's not enough. Because it really speaks to what is driving you. And then, and it's a question that I've had, I think specifically of you. It's like you have all these markers that you want to achieve. And then once you get them, then what, right? Like, then you have to really think about what is your driving force? What is ultimately your passion? Because a lot of these markers aren't even markers we have for ourselves, but that are imposed externally. And then as a leader, you have to have these external markers from whatever firm you're working with, or as you're a CEO of your startup or whatever. But ultimately, that, even when you read that success, if you haven't defined what is your passion, what your core values are that drive you, then you're going to continue to be insecure, and that's going to continue to show up.
If I can share one more thing along those lines, is that a lot of times this security versus insecurity, authentic, inauthentic, we get lost into the timelines also. Insecurity is scary for short term, but really think of long-term career. I have 20-30 years left in my career, probably more. You guys have also decades of career left, and a lot of times many of the things that we run into, you won't even remember them 10 years down the line, let alone further down the line. So play the long game. And what's important is learning from other people, what successful people have achieved and then regret it at the end of it. For example, one thing that insecurity gets us, insecurity makes us very fearful, it raises our stress hormone and stress level, and then you lose your health. And it's very well known, people will basically lose their health to make a bunch of success and money, and then they're willing to lose all that money to get the health back. Is that a good trade? Right? Being able to play the long game, and learn from other people. Because when you're insecure, you're tunnel visioned. You forget a lot of things. But once you learn from other people, from biographies, from talking to people you're inspired by, you learn that, oh, there are more important things than I'm thinking right now. And that's where the fulfillment comes in. Like, am I going to be happy after achieving this?
Hey, Yogi, I do have a very personal question. I feel like when you talk about like how transitioning into parenting can bring insecurity, it actually resonates with me. So I recently became a mom last year. I do, yeah, I do feel like my life have changed a lot, and also I see myself like becoming more vulnerable, especially like my priorities, my time are changing a lot. So I'm wondering like how can I take that vulnerability and use it to grow myself instead of seeing it as a weakness for myself.
Thank you, and congratulations for your for being a mom. One thing about especially insecurity around being parent. None of us has taken a course about how to be a good parent. Okay. And what happens is when we feel insecure about being a parent, I work with hundreds of people now, and I talk to hundreds of parents in my as my coaching work. What I've seen is the parental insecurity is not your insecurity or my insecurity. It's a human insecurity. It's a human condition nowadays. So I think in a way, if you're not feeling insecure, I'll be worried then at, well, what's off here, right? So in a way, insecurity is a sense of care, and you will never feel completely secure about this. And being okay with that, and again, we can talk about how to do your best and how to sleep peacefully at the end of the day, if you can sleep at all by having a young kid. That's more important than feeling completely secure. I was talking to one of my previous clients, and they just had a kid, and they were asking me, they feel like they're not being present with the kid. And I just told them, it's actually very normal. And I think you trying to be present when you're with them, that is all you can do right now. But asking that you'll be completely present all the time is too much to ask for. Your mind will divert, your mind will do something. But I think just it's a practice of being okay with where you are and then doing slightly better. But insecurity is part of the job description, if you will. And was there any other question in this?
How can I use it to grow myself?
How can you use it to grow yourself, right? Yeah. So I feel like when we are insecure, let's say I'm insecure about I'm not doing enough as a parent. And then we gotta do more. We gotta do more. Hoping one day we'll feel enough. We'll be doing enough. And then it can actually derail other parts of your life because you're doing so much here and not really feeling enough. But if you can say, hey, this is normal, and then you decide either with the help of your family or therapist or coach or whoever, with the help of them, you figure out, okay, decide what is enough. Then that can actually unlock a lot of energy to focus on other things because, yeah, I'm doing this. We decided it's enough, but I don't feel enough. You still won't feel enough. And to feel enough is a long-term process. Like I've worked with something called compassionate self-forgiveness because a lot of times we don't forgive ourselves. But how to compassionately forgive yourself? And we can talk about that practice at some point. But without that, you'll always blame yourself. You'll blame yourself. In the short term, deciding what's enough and calling it enough, instead of like trying to do more, trying to do more, trying to do more. It's like money. Some people have like goals. I'm gonna make enough money and then do something else. Enough? There's nothing called enough money. You gotta figure out what amount is you'll call enough. For some people, different people have different amounts, and that amount keeps changing. The amount of money we make nowadays, my dad made in a lifetime, I make more than that in 3 months. But still not enough. Not enough. Right? So you gotta decide what the marker is.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's super inspiring. Oh, sorry, Kizito. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to conclude with that. Yeah, sometimes I do feel like I haven't done enough for my kid. Balancing the work and the family is a really hard topic. So before I ask my question, I would expect some answers from you, like, oh, you can do this better to better manage your time between work and family. But instead, you just bring it out that, hey, tell yourself what is enough. Define this like a boundary, like what you have done to your kids should be enough for their growth. So I think, yeah, I will follow that and try to practice in my daily life.
Yeah, there are this internal and external work. Externally, any amount of external doing will not change your internal perception of enough. That's a separate work.
Yeah.
So for externally, we decide something and just do that. But this will not change internally. You will still not feel you're doing enough, though. Even after you have done what you committed to doing, you will feel like, I don't think it's enough. I thought it'll be enough, but it's not enough now. Parenting is one of the hardest things because you really care about this little creature you brought in the world, and it really brings all the insecurities on the forefront. Kijito?
I was picking it back off like what Miguel was saying. Part of the journey that we've discussed, or topics that we discussed today, is like around insecurities. Sometimes we might not get rid of it entirely, right? So to Miguel's question, we still want to harness that ability to be able to like make an impact, right? So, but then like what I've learned so far is like maybe sometimes we might not get rid of that insecurity to begin with, right? But then we need to like play the long game, right? So harness the ability to utilize that insecurity to get our learnings today that will help us in the long term, and then also learn how to manage, which is the key point, manage that insecurity so that it doesn't become the ladder to our failure, right? So so this is very awesome conversation today, right? So I really wanted to commend you on like this learning today for me. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And insecurity is I would say, only reason we are not able to take feedback. When somebody gives us feedback, I'm secure about something, I can take that feedback and improve. People who are secure, who are actually really good, can actually improve. They have no problem improving. But people who are insecure and they question themselves, they will push back on the feedback. I love this quote by Ronaldo, the football player. He says, I'm the best player. And one of the journalists says, really? Like, how can you be sure given Messi and this player? Like he said, that's not my point. I'm the best player in the world. I believe that. And then I express that bestness on a daily basis by working out 3-4 times 3-4 hours in the gym. I doing this. I do what the best player would do. And I can take feedback. I can improve a lot. Given I'm the best, I can still improve. If I don't think I'm the best, I can't improve anymore because like I need to hide my insecurities now. So that was very powerful. Like he's the best player, and then I can improve on top of that.
Yeah, I love that. Going back to an earlier topic, it's like like maybe one of us and none of us would be NBA players or MLS or play at the World Cup, but we could all become better basketball players or better soccer players tomorrow if we tried. I do want to go back to a question that Casito brought up earlier, and it also ties into what Ming was asking about in terms of parenthood. But do you see that the challenges that driven or who are rooted in insecurity is that present differently across genders or across cultures? Or I mean, maybe it's just like a core human thing.
I think the insecurities that show up in life, they are very shaped by cultural upbringing, and within the cultural upbringing, of course, the gender roles and minority roles and things like that, for sure. Again, generally, what I've seen is because I mean, again, as a distribution, not every. This is not true for every single person, but generally, women are told a lot more about how they should be, how they should be, how they should be in the culture. So they just grow up being generally a little bit more insecure on an average because of that. But that doesn't mean, every woman is more secure. Some women could be very secure. But I think gender plays a role, culture plays a role. Some cultures, Eastern versus Western, I've seen, Eastern culture sometimes kind of drills certain key things in your head and that make you insecure. So it can happen. Same thing with Western culture. Some other things. So culture definitely affects. I think culturally it's hard to say, which part bring more insecurity. I think it's just part of the life. Gender, I can say maybe a little bit more. It tends to be a little bit more divide, but definitely it affects a lot. And I think insecurity, as I mentioned with the kids earlier, if you are insecure trying to hide it and try to project security, your kids will likely be insecure also because you're trying to hide it. So it's not a genetic trait, but it can propagate through generations. Not genetically, but through behaviorally can happen. So definitely it plays a role. And you mentioned about the game. None of us can be, not none of us, I mean, some of us maybe can be NBA players, but most of us can't be NBA players now. But I think the point is, if you listen to like Kobe Bryant, for example, he's a legendary player. He was a legendary player. That the game you're focusing on is your game, the game of your life. Going to office, doing this MBA, doing this, working in this job. This is your game. And how can I be best at this game? How can I, despite my insecurities, despite my problems, how can I reach a higher level of potential in the game I'm playing? And that is your World Cup. That's the only cup you have. And being able to do that. I think, of course, those sports are different league. We are not playing in those sports.